Feels like it's been a while
What?
since we recorded.
Yeah, since they told us to get a life.
She said, "Find something better to do."
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
can't find anything better to do than talk about the Lord. That sounds very evangelistic to say, so I feel like I should say it. I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion. We
Yeah.
asked for comments, so I don't
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Good, bad, different, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. It's all good. People
What?
entitled to think how
This
they
is
wanna
our
think.
life.
Yeah, it's all good.
I mean, I think there's not. I don't know. For me, I've always found it interesting when you listening to it, or
Y'all need to find something better. That's what you put.
anyways. I mean, no, you pray for the person, and again, I mean, I don't think there's anything. I mean, there's a lot of topics in my life I like to talk about, but there's nothing more. I think when Christ becomes your center, this becomes what you want to
Yeah.
talk about. You know, whether I always think there's different stages to it. There's the debating piece of it, of what you're learning. Then there's the intrigue. To me, it's always about the curiosity. Like once you, which is always dangerous for different people. Once you have your foundation set in who Christ is and your relationship with Him, then you can definitely open yourself up to the curiosity of the Bible, because the Bible has so much in there. But some people get
lot.
lost in the curiosity before they
Yeah.
find the relationship, and so then they go down rabbit holes that can go all over the place. It was like I was listening to this one guy, and it was kind of interesting. It was something we talked about, but they were reacting to this video of these two, I don't know, guys talking about UFO abductions, and their topic was that a few of the people who were almost abducted said that what stopped them from being abducted was proclaiming the name of Jesus. So the name of Jesus also stops aliens, apparently.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Wait,
tinfoil
okay.
hats or cry out the name of Jesus.
Whatever.
And
Hey.
you'll stop ET from coming to get you. But it went into a topic that we talked about before and stuff like that, where, you know, a lot of, and it was interesting because, and I would have to go back and check the statistics and everything, but they were talking about a lot of people who claim to be abducted, have alien experiences, have been tapped into, like, the majority percentage have been tapped into like new age stuff and things like that. And really what they were saying is maybe like this other guy was saying this, it's kind of like what we talked about. We forget that Paul says that we don't fight against flesh and bones, but against principalities.
Yeah, spirits
And
and principalities.
it sounds weird to say because everyone gets into this weird sci-fi, but it's almost like there's the spirit realm, which is another dimension, which sometimes like you see it, you can tap into it at times, right? There's an Old Testament story, and I don't remember 1st or 2nd Samuel, or maybe it's in the Kings, where the prophet Samuel has died, and Saul goes to a medium to bring back Samuel's spirit, and his spirit shows up, and it's not like, you know, he just came from heaven or wherever. We don't know, you know, the whole sequences of things, but there's this dimension, there's these other dimensions, right? Because Jesus sees this other dimension. He talks about angels being around us. There's a story, I think, even of Elijah or Elisha, I can't remember which one, where he opens his servant's eyes and he sees all these angels out there ready to go fight for them. And so if that's the case, you have to remember there's demons and things like that. And, you know, there was so many angels that followed the devil when he was casted down. And so there's these other dimensions where, you know, another dimension, a spiritual dimension, where maybe they can come in. But again, I think for Christians, and again, this is where curiosity can play into it if you have your solid foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, you get into that and you start freaking out and get scared. But for Christians, we should be solid on that. If we have a relationship with God,
Yeah.
there's nothing they can do to us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they'll tempt us and things like that, but there's nothing physically. I don't believe a demon can come and possess you without you allowing them to. Whether that's opening up to the black arts or, you know, witchcraft
Whatever that is,
or all
yeah.
these, the Ouija board, all these other
Any
things.
kind of demonic
Now, don't get me
thing,
wrong. I don't think every Ouija board you touch is gonna cause it, but it's more of you opening yourself up to it. Just like the same thing with Christ. Christ doesn't come and force himself on you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to invite him. You have to open up your heart. You got to be vulnerable. You got to let him in. That goes the same for the opposite. You know, you got to, open yourself up to that, become vulnerable to that whatever it is. And so I always find it interesting, those pieces of it. But that's where I think you got to be careful with. I think curiosity is good. We should never discourage curiosity, but always have that foundation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Curiosity, I think curiosity is a good thing. I mean, we all should have some kind of wonder, about who God is. But your curiosity, and for me, it should just be something that's going to draw you closer to God, though.
Yeah.
Not anything other than that. Because I think sometimes, like, when people read the Bible, and I think people have a real misconception of what the Bible really is. Like, the Bible is us, humanity.
Yeah.
Like I was telling you earlier, like the stuff I was reading and seeing in the Old Testament, like that stuff is happening like right now, still today.
Yeah.
So, so it's just, for me, I think we all should have some kind of wonder, or some kind of curiosity, not only within the Bible, but just of us, like, why are we even here? Like, how did we get, you didn't create yourself.
Yeah.
We can go back as far back and say, okay, your mother created, you know what I mean? Like, we can do that, but you know what I'm saying? It's like,
but that's why I think I find the Bible curious, and when you look into it, but the problem is some people, they'll look into it, and if they can't explain it, then all of a sudden the explanation of Christ coming to the earth is not, and that's what I mean. You got to be careful with it.
Yeah.
But that's where you have to have that curiosity, because it's like in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it talks about how in the times of Noah, the sons of God were sleeping with the women of the earth, and that created the giants. And it's easy to be like, okay, well, how does that explain this? Or I don't see giants, or this and that, and what does that mean? And you get into some really weird theology and thought process and people trying to explain it. But one of the things is, like, God is way greater than us, and he created all this stuff. But he, at the same time, he allows it to kind of, live and fulfill what it does and how it does. And I think sometimes we get stuck on the explanation instead of the focus point, because the whole point of the Bible is always to lead us back to Christ, and it's always going back to them on that piece.
Yeah. So.
You had any alien encounters or what?
E.T. phone home.
With the mic look?
This guy.
No, I mean, with everything that they show on TV and all that, people are gonna believe a lot of different things. Are there aliens or not? I don't give a.
I mean, I don't think it would. I think
we have enough of them crossing the border here, so.
Oh my God.
Well, that's a
we don't need more.
That's a different terminology for aliens. Is a say well that's almost the terminology the Bible uses for us on being on this earth, that we're aliens to this earth. Yeah. But I think the thing is, even if there was other life or whatever, it doesn't really.
We're all aliens at some point or other. You go to Mexico, you cross a certain amount of miles, and you don't have papers, you're considered an alien in their country. Yeah. Or any country. Yeah. So it happens in every country.
Yeah, but we weren't talking. We weren't talking about political issues on aliens. We were talking about extraterrestrial.
No, I'm not talking about politically correct or not.
You wit that way.
I don't give a darn about politically correct or what.
You don't give a darn about much. Anyways. But I think the thing is, even if alien life existed, it doesn't change the message of God. It doesn't change the message of Christ. Of course. It's all the same. But I think that's what people see. I mean, when people are trying to find an excuse to discredit the gospel or anything, they'll find any little reason. So it's like, oh, well, aliens weren't mentioned in the Bible. Right. So it can't be real. And it's like, no, that's not the case.
Not right.
I mean, they have that, what is it, Area 51 or something like that they say they have all the weird things. So, supposedly they have.
Who knows?
They have all the secrets or whatever.
Who knows? But I do think when you have a good curiosity of the Bible, it leads you back to Christ. And that's one of the things I think looking into the Old Testament, having that curiosity is going to pull you into Christ and what's going on there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we see in Acts chapter 22. So welcome to the No Name Podcast, episode 93. Hit the like and subscribe button. We talk about everything. Aliens, both extraterrestrial and political, I guess. But seriously, I mean, on the topic of politics, we try not to get into too much politic talk, but we're all going to have our opinion. That's just the way it is. That's life. That's with anything. I think one of the things we have to understand is we're going to agree to disagree. There's issues that are foundational. I think that's the problem with, I would say, America today is like we don't know how to have discussions anymore. Everyone shuts everything down.
Because everyone is opinionated.
I think everyone's sensitive. I don't think it's opinionated. I think everyone's sensitive to both sides of or three sides or whatever sides there are. How many ever sides there are?
I'm right.
I think that everyone's sensitive, and it's like we don't learn to agree to disagree. But
and that's what you see here.
Yeah, same thing in Acts 22. Acts 22 is really, when you boil it down to it, it starts becoming. It's all about I would say, politics of that time issue. The politics of the Jews of that time was what you see in Acts chapter 22. Hopefully you've been keeping up with us through the Acts. As you know, Paul has made it to Rome, and he gets there, and he starts speaking of Christ, and they're rioting. They're ready to beat him up, kill him, and they've grabbed him, and they brought him, the centurion. Mm-hmm. And that's what you hear from Acts 22. And it says, "Brothers and fathers, hear my defense before you now." And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. So before, I guess he was speaking, he must have been speaking, I don't know, Greek or whatever they were speaking in the Roman times. And they wouldn't stop to listen to him. And the moment he started speaking Hebrew, here's the part that jumped out to me, and I think it's verse 3. And this is where I go with about the curiosity, because there's a familiar name in there that we read about earlier on in Acts. It says, "Then he said, I am indeed a Jew, born in Taurus of Cilicia, but brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel, however you pronounce that, taught according to the strictness of our father's law, and was zealous towards God as you all are today." Now, that name there, Gamaliel, or whichever, the one I butchered, that's a familiar name. If you go back to the beginning of Acts of our what we've been doing, this is the man that stood up among the Pharisees when they had Peter, and John, and they were ready to kill them. Yeah. And he said, "Look, if this is of God, there's nothing we can do to stop it. But it's not of God, then it'll die off like all the other rebellions have." And there's some people that believe Gamaliel was almost maybe like Nicodemus. He started seeing the light. Maybe he became a Christian, but was still holding on to some of his Pharisee things. But some believe that he became a Christian because of that topic there. And then you see Paul mentioning him here as a mentor of his, someone that taught him because he was well known in the law. And I think we had this discussion before. There was Pharisees who became Christians or became part of the way, part of the group that was led by Jesus' disciples. And I think part of that is because they had that curiosity of the Old Testament, that they weren't jaded by it, that they were able to see later on the proof of who Christ was. They could see Jesus being foretold in the Old Testament because remember, we have to remember, like, they don't have these letters. They don't have the New Testament. None of this has been written. So whenever they refer back to the Word of God and stuff like that, they're referring to the Old Testament.
Right. Yeah.
I thought you were saying something. And so you see that piece there. You see there's a curiosity of it. And he even says here in verse 4, "I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prison both men and women." So again, Paul's confessing here to them, like he's reminding them, like, I'm the one that went, and he said, I ain't just killed men, I killed men and women. He said, I binded them, I killed them. He persecuted them.
Yeah, because he thought he was doing the right thing.
Yep.
You know, in the name of God.
Yep.
You know. Yes.
And I think that's the thing. Like when you start looking in through the Bible, see, the Old Testament, all the Jews had it at that time. Mm-hmm. So one of the things is if you look at it at the surface level, all you get is the law. But when you start reading and getting the curiosity and allowing the Spirit of God to move in you, you start seeing the other pieces of it. And I think that's what you get from a Gamaliel. That's what you get from a Nicodemus and some of the other ones who are devout followers of the law, but they saw Christ in it later on. And I think that's what you see with Saul too. Saul had to have his eyes open. Like literally he had to be blinded and then reopened to see it. Yeah. And that's what he talks about here, being blinded on the way to Damascus and hearing Jesus say, I am Jesus of Nazareth whom you are persecuting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he hears that piece. He's giving his testimony. So you see Paul here setting up for the Roman Jews of all that he's done, right? He goes and he says, look, I was the guy that was persecuting this. I was the guy going after it. He even talks about being the one that they brought the coats to witness of Stephen's death. He affirms his Pharisee level by mentioning Gamaliel as his mentor. But then he begins to talk about the transformation, how Christ blinded him, but then gave him sight again.
Right there where you're talking about where he's giving his testimony.
Yeah.
He says that he's the only one that heard the voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of his other
they saw the light. They saw the light, but they didn't hear the voice. Because the message was just for him.
Right. It was just and I think that happens nowadays when God, when there's a preaching like the podcast or a teaching or whatever, God specifically talks to each individual, and they're gonna hear it differently than everybody else. It might be the same thing, but differently because God is speaking to them.
Yep.
And that's something marvelous, because God spoke to him only.
Yeah,
was calling him, to his purpose. And here you're going back. Now I know what I was going to say when you were saying that there were Jews that had gotten converted, and it's true. Sometimes we profile everybody like, all the Pharisees are bad or all the Sadducees were bad, but a lot of them were sincere in what they believe, until God started dealing with them. And a lot of them changed their heart.
And I think that's
and that's the way it is now today. Profiling is something that like all blacks are this, all Mexicans are this and that, and not everybody's the same. And Paul here was trying to say that that God changed them. But still he learned from the best. Gamaliel, that was his mentor. He taught him the law.
Well, I think part of it is that at the beginning of it, you see of this faith as it's growing, we divided between Christian and Jew.
Yeah.
But for them, they were all Jews mostly.
Right.
They started bringing in the Gentiles, but it was very much an expansion of the Jewish religion, because all the first converts are all Jews.
Right.
The disciples are Jews. The first people they were preaching to when they come out of the upper room are Jews.
Yeah.
And they start reaching out. Peter starts reaching out. Paul, and that's when it starts becoming different, and it's an expansion of it. But they all hold to the Jewish custom, because one of the things what I find interesting about his testimony, it opens up more to what happened on the road to Damascus.
Yes. And
you see that that he was blinded, and he had to have his guys who were there lead him, and they're actually leading him to a Christian Jew, or the Jew of who was part of the way, which this was someone they were going out to go kill. And so it had to be weird for the soldiers who were with him, who were ordered to go and arrest these people. They're going to leave Paul now with this guy. But there was something that the way Paul describes Ananias that I think is, at least for me, was different from what I remember hearing in our earlier.
Yeah, in like Acts 9.
In Acts 9,
like 9, right?
I think so. He's described as, God talking to him, a man of faith. Yeah. But here in verse 12, Paul says, then a certain Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there. Now, he doesn't say according to the Christians of the way or what. He's saying that this man was devout according to the law. That means the Old Testament. Yeah. And having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there. And that's one of the things, like, a lot of the Jews that came and they saw Christ, they saw the freedom in the new covenant, but it wasn't that they were bad people before either. They were living according to the law. This man was, even by Jewish standards of that time, was a devout man to the law. And in other words, he followed the ways of Moses and all the laws that were there. He was respected by his community, but he had learned about God had spoken to him. He learned about Jesus. He understood it. And I think that's one of the distinctions sometimes we forget there, especially in these newer times, because sometimes we can swing one way or the other, and that we go where we think Jesus destroyed the law, and I know we've talked about this so many times. Jesus didn't destroy the law; he fulfilled it.
Right.
And he gave us freedom from the law. But it doesn't mean the law's not there.
Right.
He gave us freedom from it. And I think that's something you see here in Ananias.
And that's what I was going to say. Jesus never came and said that we didn't have to follow the law no more. Because, even he said, I have come to fulfill the law.
Yeah.
The grace of God is there because he knows that the law is perfect. And we're not perfect. And we're going to break the law, But we're supposed to follow the law too, You have to follow the laws of the land, You have to drive the speed limit. If you don't, guess what? You get a ticket. But and then you have to pay that ticket. You can't say, well, I'm under the grace of God. I'm not going to pay the ticket because, the law doesn't apply to me.
It don't work like that.
And that's what one thing Paul was even saying about Ananias, he had a good testimony.
Yeah.
But he was a man of the law, a devout man, it says, according to the law. So even though Ananias was a servant of God, he believed in the law.
Well, I think he understood the heart of the law. That's the piece that people miss, I think. And that's what Jesus was trying to make them understand, is the heart of the law. The heart of the law was always there to help us have a relationship with God and other people. It was never meant to bind us or make us more superior than others or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with the law. It started making people feel more superior than the other. Mm-hmm. But you still had the purity of it. Because if you go back, Moses, they all broke the law. Yeah. Moses murdered. Mm-hmm. Abraham had committed and broke the law too. But the difference was they understood the heart of the law, that they could always go back to God and find his redemption. Mm-hmm. They had a relationship with him. And the law was always meant to build the relationship between mankind and God. But what happened is man created it becoming a barrier because they made themselves gods, or they made themselves, superior to them. And so I think in this case, you find people who were devout, but because they saw the heart of the law. That's why I truly believe Nicodemus, he was able to see who Jesus was because he believed the heart of the law, not the surface of the law. And I think that can happen in Christianity too. Like we can have if we don't have a relationship with Christ and we only go on the surface of the new covenant, then you're just like the Pharisees. You lose a piece of it. If all you do is start going, well, I got to be perfect. I got to ask for forgiveness every single day. I got to keep asking for forgiveness for sins that I've done, that I did 10 years ago. And, if you keep going that route, you haven't accepted the heart of the covenant, which is God loves us unconditionally and he forgave all our sins. And if we're willing to accept it, then he starts transforming us and changing us. But if you stay at the surface level, you're always going to be stuck there. And it's no difference than the Pharisees. They were stuck at the surface level of the law. Okay, I got to follow this exactly. Moses had the 10 Commandments. Moses had the laws of God spoken to him, but yet Moses screwed up a lot. But yet he's seen as one of the main people of the faith, especially for the Jewish. And so I think that's one of the things is understanding that the heart of the law was always meant to be there. What I find... Oh, go ahead.
So, and I'm totally in agreement with everything you're saying, but I was want to take it to something different for what I saw. This is what I saw when I was... That we do here. We say you have to love God first, and then you love people, right? And I actually got to see that here because if you think about it, these people wanted to kill Paul. They wanted him dead.
Yeah.
Even after he got finished talking, they didn't care. They still wanted him. They wanted him dead. They even plotted to kill him. So, but it made me think about like how when Jesus said, and I got it pulled up here. In Matthew 5:44-46, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And I believe that that's exactly what Paul was doing here, man. Yeah. You know, these people wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
You know, and he was like, you know what? Because I follow the teachings of Christ, and I believe in that. You know, I'm going to continue to follow that. You know, I'm going to love y'all.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, I think part of it was, I mean, you look at it and we see in his testimony here, he opens up a lot more, right, on certain things. And I think the reason this was so important to him and why, and it's naturally what you said, the love of God in him. But you also have to understand Paul's ministry and what God called him for. So one of the things you see is in Jerusalem, Jerusalem at the time was probably the Mecca for the Jews, right? That's where they went and they sought God because they still had the temple there and things like that. And they would go there and they were marginalized, but they would go there and look for it. Well, that's where you have James, the brother of Jesus. You have Peter being there. You have a lot of the main disciples. Some of them went out, but you had the core group of John, Peter, and James there. And so they're handling that piece. But as you see this, and you see, but Rome is the capital and the centerpiece for the Roman Empire, which at that time was the whole known world. And Paul's objective was to not just reach the Jews, but reach the Gentiles, which is it's going to send them in an uproar. But before we get to that piece, you see why. Part of it is, one, the circumstance he's put in. If you look at verse 17, he says, now it happened when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple that I was in a trance, and I saw him saying to me, make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, for they will not receive your testimony concerning me. So I said, Lord, they know that in every synagogue I imprison and beat those who believed on you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I was also standing by,
which he was,
consenting to his death and guarding to the close of those who were departing him. And prior to reading the next piece, basically Paul's saying, I don't understand why they're going to kick me out of Jerusalem. He's like, they know who I am. They're not going to do this. And basically, God knew that the Jews wanted Paul dead because he was a convert of the highest level.
Yeah.
This was a Pharisee of Pharisees. This was a man that was killing these people and now saying he was wrong and they're the right way. But the thing that triggered off the everyone else, in verse 21, it says, then he said to me, and this is him recounting his testimony from God. He says, depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. Verse 22, and they listened to him until this word. And then they raised their voice and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he is not fit to live.
Yeah, right.
And here's the thing. So God sends Paul out of Jerusalem because he knows the Jews there will not listen to him.
Right.
The ones that he's trying to convert, they're not going to listen to him. And they're going to be too focused on killing them. So he sends them to the Gentiles. Well, now he's gone to Rome, where again, there's a lot of Jews here, but this is not the main Jewish hub. Like, the main Jewish hub was Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jerusalem.
This is the main Gentile hub.
Yes.
This is the Roman Empire. And That's one of the things. Like, there's a lot of core things here. One, just because Christ changes us doesn't mean that it always changes our circumstances. Paul was still a hunted man in Jerusalem because of his crime, because of what he did and what he was converted to. You know, you go back to the earlier Acts, a lot of the people of the way were afraid of him because of what he did. And the Jewish hated him because of him turning his back on them. Mm-hmm. So you got that piece.
Got the target. Mm-hmm.
But now in Rome, he mentions that he's there for the Gentiles, and the Jews are upset.
Yeah, they don't like it.
Why? Because this is their God. Mm-hmm. You know, it became a very political issue because in the Jewish history, in the Jewish custom, in the Jewish religion, it was just for Jews, right? And even when you go there, you know, God even says, "I came for the Jews first." Mm-hmm. But you see him, I came for them first, but he didn't say I came for them only. They saw that, and seeing that Paul was going to go, and what's interesting is they're mad that Paul's going to go teach them something that they don't even want to believe.
Yeah, they don't want to believe it.
They don't even want to believe. Yeah. And that's what happens when we get blinded in arguments and things like that, and we're not listening. Like, these people should say, go ahead, just don't mess with us Jews. We want to stay who we are. Go talk to all the Gentiles you want.
But instead, they got mad.
They got mad because he said God sent them to go to the Jews. And so you get this argument, and they're ready to kill him. They're like, away with you. We're about to kill you. But again, here's the other piece of where you see God's redemption and you see God's thing in it, is that even as they grab him and they're ready to go, and they bound him and they're ready to do all of this. And then Paul in verse 25 finds this very curious. And as they bounded him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by, "Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is Roman and uncondemned?" And when the centurion heard that, he went and told the commander, saying, "Take care of what you do, for this man is a Roman." And that's one of the things we learn here, and I don't remember it's in the earlier parts of Acts. Paul is a Roman citizen.
Yes. Yep.
Not only is he Jew, but he's a Roman citizen. Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, in that times, the Jews were seen as marginalized. They were not Roman citizens unless they were able to buy it or they were born of Roman citizenship. Mm-hmm. Paul later discloses here to the centurion, because the centurion said, "I paid a lot for my Roman citizenship." He says, "No, I was born of it." Mm-hmm. So he was born a Roman citizen. The reason this is important is because the Jews could shout all they want. And if he was just a Jewish man, the Romans could kill him, beat him, do whatever they wanted. Yeah. Just like they did with Jesus. Jesus wasn't a Roman citizen. Right. They could do whatever they wanted. They didn't have to give him a fair trial or anything.
Right.
But because he's a Roman citizen, now he has rights. And this is something that God uses consistently with Paul. One of the reasons I think God sent Paul to the Gentiles and sent them to Rome. Peter will go to Rome later on, but none of the other disciples, at least, were unaware of, or at least not that I remember in the Bible saying, we're Roman citizens.
Yeah. No.
So if they ever caused a ruckus in Rome or certain areas, they could be killed without question.
Yeah,
here,
killed too.
Paul can assert his Roman citizenship. And why is this important? Because sometimes God puts us in different areas in our life, or we're born in certain things where it gives us that opportunity. I don't know, and I don't want to give specific examples, but you just never know, right? You may be in a certain company or a certain neighborhood or certain whatever, and God put you there because you can speak to those people. You can be there, you know, and that's something God did here with Paul. Paul was a Roman citizen, and they couldn't do anything with him. Verse 29 says, "Then immediately those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was Roman, because he had bounded him." See, they're even worried now because they bounded him without giving him a trial, without anything. Yeah. See, when they thought he was a Jew, it was nothing.
Yeah.
Now that he's a Roman citizen,
they're like, "Oh, whoa, hey, what are we doing?"
Yeah. and that's the thing, like. You know, Paul knew his identity. He knew he was a Roman citizen. He used it when he needed to. And it allowed him certain things. And I think that's something that sometimes if you want to look at it from a spiritual standpoint, you know, a lot of times we can talk about things of Christ, but people don't see Christ in us. Mm-hmm. But then when we assert ourselves as a son or a daughter of Christ, there's nothing that can touch us. Mm-hmm. Like, we've been set free. We've been given that. That's one of the things Paul later talks about. And I think this is why he ties, my opinion, he ties it to his Roman, he can tie it to his Roman citizenship when he talks about that we become heirs of God. Because there's something different to buy your citizenship, like one person did. You can't buy you can't buy being an heir to someone. There's something about being born into it. Paul was born a citizen, which made it even worse for the centurion. Because I truly believe the centurion, they treated him a little bit better, but they were still like, you bought yours. You weren't a real citizen.
Right.
And Paul is born into it, and that's something that he describes later on in his letters of how we're heirs to God. We didn't buy our way into God. We didn't earn our way into God. We're heirs of God. And I think he draws it from that. Verse 30 says, the next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all the council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. So here's the interesting part. The main Roman officer, he wants to know, okay, you put me in this bad situation, so now I'm going to make you guys all answer. And guess what this does? This gives Paul another
opportunity. Yeah,
another audience.
Open opportunity
to speak the gospel, to speak his testimony, to and it was Paul's strategy all the time when he went wherever he went.
Yeah,
he's coming here to first speak to the Jews, but guess who his focus is? The Gentiles.
And you notice he always take advantage of his opportunities to speak to people too.
Yeah, I think it was the wisdom that God gave him. He knew the right times to do it, and where to step in.
And not only that, now the Jews are in trouble.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because the Roman soldiers are now mad at them because they put them in a position where they can get in trouble.
Yeah, they can get in trouble. Yeah.
See, so God turned everything around on them. They thought they were gonna get rid of Paul, and kill him. But I mean, to this day we live like that too. As Christianity, we're all supposed to get along. Because we all say we all serve the same God, all churches, but yet we're always against each other because our indifferences, our beliefs might be a little bit, different than the others, but and we're always either talking about one another and all that instead of just let's reach out to the people.
Yep.
And Paul just went there to minister, and not to cause this, but the Jews didn't want to listen,
What was the whole thing about him going to the Gentile that triggered them off? And I always find that interesting. But I think that's where, to your point, we got to focus on the main purpose of spreading the gospel.
Even Jesus said it, I have come to you, to the Jews, but you guys have rejected me.
Yeah.
See? So, they're rejecting Paul. Even though Paul just came to the Gentiles, but it's like when people might not agree with you, that's fine, but once they start rejecting you and all that, that's a different story.
Well, and that's the whole irony of this, right? Is that if they really wanted to get, and this is where people can get blinded with their anger because of, and this is going to happen in life, like when you're dealing with people. Sometimes you're dealing with something inside someone that they've held on for a long time. We all did. Yeah. That's part of the transformation. Like, none of us are perfect. We've all had that imperfection, and there's always that thing inside of us. And here Paul's dealing with the Jews, and it's a little bit more outwardly. But when he first gets there, they're mad that he's trying to spread the message of the way to them. And you would have thought that if they were thinking of clear mind, they would have said, all right, well, let him go to the Gentiles. Let's leave it alone. But they're so blinded by their rage that they don't even want him going to the Gentiles and teach something they don't believe in. So you see this irony in it. But again, it opens up the door for Paul. The other thing is you got to be willing and vulnerable to allow God to use you like that way. Because it's easy to read this and shout about it, and people will preach on this. But it's something else to live your life that way. Like, the circumstances didn't turn out the way Paul wanted to. Paul knew he was headed to Rome. Paul knew he was going to be bound. Paul knew all these things were going to happen. Yeah. But it's something different to actually go through those things and have to trust God to lead you through it. It's so funny. The air behind us is blowing this curtain. So there's a ghost around us the whole time.
They probably turn on the fans.
No, I know. No, I'm just saying. It's just funny because I didn't notice it until I turned and I was looking at it. And I was like, it looks like a whole bunch of ghosts or spirits are trying to come out.
I don't know why you turned those fans.
It doesn't matter. But anyways, it's again, that's Acts 22. Hit the like and subscribe button. Share with others. Hopefully, you guys been enjoying it. Always open to any comments, as we can see. And
any. Bring them on.
Good or bad.
Yeah, bring them on.